Hi everyone, welcome back to Mzansi True Crime Diva. My name is Diva and I am very happy to be back with yet another true crime story. Today we will be talking about a serial killer. We'll be talking about Sipho Dube, who's also known as the Mine Dump serial killer. Well, the Johannesburg Mine Dump serial killer rather. He's also known as the Pied Piper of the mine dumps. You'll figure out why very soon. This is a very long story, so I do just want to get into it. But before I do, I have to warn you all that this is a true crime story and I will be describing very horrible injuries to victims, this time child victims. I'll be using adult dialogue to do so. The story is very heartbreaking. It is horrendous. So if you do feel overwhelmed at any point of my video, please feel free to click away. Do not forget to stay tuned to the very end of the video where I show you guys a slideshow of people who are currently missing in South Africa. And don't forget to subscribe and to like the video, as well as comment down below what you think about this entire story. I know you'll have a lot of thoughts when you're done watching the whole story. So let us just jump straight into it. Like I said, very long story. So Sipho Dube.
There is indeed no doubt at all, in my view, that the accused poses a significant danger to society.
He got a kick out of this, like most serial killers.
Now, there's no documented history about him because his birth was never registered and his fingerprints were never entered into the system. Even in his adult years, he never acquired an ID book. When he was born, traditionally, a slaughtering of a cow was supposed to be done to sort of introduce him to his ancestors, and even this was not done. He grew up in Mhlumayo in Ladysmith. He attended school at the Mhlumayo Primary School. He caused a lot of trouble at the primary school. When he was in grade 3, his teacher, Miss Sithole, actually nicknamed him Dodgy because he was always dodging his classes. Fellow pupils at the school were often assaulted and abused by him. He started stealing when he was just 7 years old. He stole his neighbor's portable radio, and when he was confronted about this, he told them that they were just full of shit. When he was just 10 years old, he stole church money from the altar. He was expelled from school when he was in grade 5. It was during this chaotic and troublesome childhood that he had his first sexual encounter. When he was still a young boy, a homosexual man forced Dube into simulated sex. What this meant is that the homosexual man shoved his penis between young Dube's thighs, and this obviously left him scarred for life. Another traumatic incident that literally left him scarred for life was when a bus ran over him. He had to spend 4 months in hospital thereafter, and he almost lost his life. After this incident, his trouble worsened, his behavior worsened, and he began breaking into people's houses. He began breaking into neighbors' houses and robbing them of their goods. A community member would later say that Dube was often seen grabbing a girl and then dragging her into the bushes, obviously to rape her. They wouldn't really do anything about this because they feared him and his Sangoma mother. Neighbors said that he was last seen after raping a girl in the year 2000. Miss Sithole would later recall a day where she was shocked to find Dube at her house in the suburbs of Ladysmith. She was confused as to how he had found her place of residence and was really uncomfortable because she knew about his record of breaking into people's houses. After his visit, she started experiencing some breaking-ins. She realized that the person was stealing duvets and things that a homeless person would steal. In 1997, he received an 18-month sentence for attempted theft, and then in 1999, he was sentenced to 3 months imprisonment for house break-ins in Ladysmith. In 1999, in Vienna in KwaZulu-Natal, it was found that he had abducted a young boy. Dube gave this boy 3 options. Either he stabs him, either he shoots him, or the boy agrees to pretend to be his wife. So in essence, he really didn't give the boy any choice at all, and the boy had to pretend to be his wife. And what this meant is that Dube actually forced him into having sex with him. He then anally raped the young boy before running off with the boy's bicycle. On the 23rd of March 2001, 38-year-old Rashunthi Singh, a widow and a mother of two, told her mom that she was going to the bank and would be returning home late. She was actually going to meet with a male friend of hers at the Burgersfort Monument at Wagon Hill, where she happened to come across Dube. Her companion then fled the scene. Dube then robbed her and stoned her to death. When her body was found, her face was covered with blood and she had terrible facial injuries.
She was badly hit. Her face and all was finished.
There were a number of big rocks found laying next to her dead body, as well as a neat white court shoe on the cement paving next to the body. It is unclear when him and his mom moved to Johannesburg, but now in his earliest 20s, his mother was practicing muti in Jeep in Johannesburg, while he was living under the bridges of Johannesburg South. He survived by selling scrap, and as a hobby, he was killing and raping children. After raping a child, he would then start saying a prayer. If he felt that it was a good prayer, then he would let the child go. But if he felt that it was a bad prayer, he would kill the child. In one occasion, 4 kids were playing outside when they were approached by Dube. He offered them some money if they helped him carry some boxes. 2 of the girls agreed, and then they went with Dube. He lured them to a veld, and when they got to the edge of the veld, he told one of them to stay behind and continued going with the other. When they got there, he forced her to lie down and to take off her clothes. He then began raping her, both vaginally and anally. He then took the 8 rand that she had, and he also kept her tracksuit pants. He then told her to go fetch her friend who was still waiting for them at the edge of the veld. The child then ran to the edge of the veld, got her friend, and then they both ran off. On the 5th of October 2002, he approached 2 boys who were at a shop and asked them to help him with an errand and offered them some money if they did so. The one boy got a bad feeling and then ran off, but the other was physically forced to keep going with Dube. He then gave the boy the 3 options of either being stabbed, shot, or pretending to be his wife. The boy obviously chose the latter choice, and Dube sodomized the little boy. Thereafter, he told the boy to go with him to go get some cigarettes. When they arrived at the shop, the boy saw a security guard and started running towards the security guard, and Dube fled the scene. This incident lasted over 2 hours. On the 15th of October 2002, Dube approached a little girl wearing what appeared to be a police's uniform. He told the girl to go with him, and then he took her by the arm and led her to a bush. He then told her that he cannot let her go because he plans on killing her later that evening. He then took her to a mine dump and forced her to undress. When she didn't comply, he hit her and then began raping her. He raped her again for a second time before walking her to a petrol station where she finally ran off. This incident lasted over 6.5 hours. On the 29th of October, a 13-year-old girl was home alone when Dube knocked on the door. He claimed to be an electrician and told the girl that he was there to fix the lights. There had been some power issues in the area, so this story seemed quite true. He then told the girl that she needed to go with him so they can go get an electricity card. This is how he lured her to a bush. When they got there, he suddenly just hit her. She began crying, and then he started forcing her to undress. He threatened to kill her, and then he began raping her. He then said his prayer and then felt that it was a good prayer, so he decided to just keep her overnight under the bridge where he lived. I'm going to insert some pictures here. These are the conditions that she had to stay in overnight with this stinking man in his stinking conditions. The girl later pointed out the scene where she had been raped and abducted overnight. The police went to the bridge and they found Dube there. Instead of organizing an identity parade for the girl to positively and safely identify him, they instead decided to break protocol and take her to the little girl's home. They made them face each other. They made Dube and the little girl face each other. And then they asked the girl, "Is this the man who raped and kidnapped you?" Fearing for her safety, The girl obviously said no. I mean, she was doing this from what was supposed to be the comfort and safety of her own home, but now is very compromised. The police then took Dube back to his bridge without taking any photos, without taking any of his DNA. They just let him go free, just like that. This isn't the last time, by the way, that the police would have him and then let him go free. At this point, Gerard Labuschagne was tasked with compiling a profile on this man. In doing so, he noticed a couple of things as he was studying all these crimes. He realized that the crime scenes were all close together. In all the cases, there were threats of violence and threats to kill. The man was always using a con story to lure his victims. There was an escalation of the time span of each crime. He was becoming more brazen with each crime. There were no attempts to conceal his identity. He didn't use a balaclava and he didn't use a condom. He also kept clothing items as a trophy. The victims were all children, so there was no way he was keeping these clothing items to wear or anything like that. It was very clear that he was just keeping them as trophies. And this obviously is a massive sign of a pedophile. He always spoke about killing the children. He was quoted aggressively saying things like, "Why are you afraid to die? You're going to die anyway," as well as obviously the choice that he was giving them of either being stabbed, shot, or having to pretend to be his wife. This all made Labuschagne come to the conclusion that this guy is actually going to move on to killing the children. He then compiled a profile of the man. He told the investigators that they should be looking for a man who's between the ages of 20 to 27 years old. He was single and unemployed, lived in an informal accommodation, had little to no formal education, had no vehicle, and had a criminal history of rape and burglary. And he also comes from a rural area. Labuschagne then advised that the investigation should be very DNA orientated. He further advised that if the general investigators start coming across dead bodies of children, that they should inform the sexual offense investigators. Because what happens usually is that the sexual offenses investigators only deal with sexual offenses, and then the general investigators deal with murders and all that. So they would not actually have been able to make a connection between the serial rapist from the sexual offenses to this new tendency of bodies that is being found. On the 13th of April 2003, 14-year-old Thabo was sent by his parents to go to the shops. He never returned home. Instead, he was accosted by Dube, who ended up sodomizing him and then strangling him to death. He then cut off his arm and then cut off his leg to sell to his mother for muti. When the boy's parents reported him missing, Sipho gave them a call. He said, "Hello, my name is Sipho. Your son Thabo is dead, and I am at the place where the police are with his dead body." He called them again for a second time and then told the mom to tell her husband to just forget about his son because he's dead. 12 days after Thabo's disappearance, a decomposing body of a young boy was found just a few kilometers away from his house. Police failed to make a connection between the missing persons case and the dead body that was found of a young boy. On the 6th of August 2003, Nomnikelo Juma disappeared while walking home from school. Her body was found at the bottom of a mine dump in Bertrams with stab wounds in her neck and one underneath her armpit. When police were investigating the murder, Dube gave them a tour of the murder scene, claiming that he had merely been a witness. He led them up to the hill where they also found her blood-soaked blazer as well as her books. He explained to them how she had been raped and then repeatedly stabbed before staggering down the hill and then collapsing to her death at the bottom of the hill. The policemen failed to notice that Dube's shoes were completely covered in Nomnikelo's blood. He even had the audacity to scold the police for being so terrible at their jobs. On the 18th of September 2003, 10-year-old Lukhanya Kowane and a friend of his decided to go pick up some fruit from a tree on their way back from school. They were then approached by Dube, who asked them to help him carry some boxes and offered them each 20 rand. The friend got a bad feeling about this and disagreed, but Lukhanya agreed and went with him. The following day, Lukhanya's body was found by a motorist on Wema Pen Road, with very bad facial injuries. He had open wounds on his face, and he had been calling his friend's name out. A concerned, homeless and stinky man came to assist. It was none other than Dube. Lucanio could probably smell and hear that Dube was there, but he was unable to do anything or to say anything. The motorist who found him called an ambulance, but when he realized that the ambulance was not coming, he decided to take the little boy to the hospital himself, where he died the next day. On the 24th of September 2003, two cousins, Anele and Siabonga, arrived at Anele's mother's house with Dube, who was claiming to be selling a Rambo figurine. Anele's mother then told him that she does not have any money and asked him to leave. Later on, believing that Dube had gone away, she sent the two cousins on an errand to her sister's house, which was very, very close by. When the boys did not return as quickly as she had expected, she went out to look for them, and she found them in the company of Dube. This time, she told him that if he does not leave, she's going to call the police. She then told the boys to follow him back into the house. 5 minutes later, she realized that the boys had failed to do so, and then when she went back to look for them, they were nowhere to be seen, and they were never ever seen alive again. On the 8th of November 2003, Dube approached Maria Johnson, who was selling clothes in Jewel Street in Malvern. She was with two children, one of them being her 11-year-old niece, Tina Bernardes. He offered Maria the opportunity to earn some commission by selling some cell phones on his behalf. He told her that he had a shop just around the corner and that the kids can just come with him to come fetch the cell phones. He even added that the kids should come with a bag so that they would not be targeted by robbers if they were carrying cell phones loosely on the streets. Maria then told the kids to go along and go fetch the cell phones. But as they were walking, the one child starts getting a really bad feeling about all of this. She realizes that this man reeks of alcohol and has a very bad smell. And then she tells Tina that maybe they should just turn back. But Tina insists because her aunt sent her. Then the one kid stayed behind, contemplating what she should do. She didn't know whether to just go back to her aunt or to keep going, but she just stayed where she was, contemplating her choices. With a tight grip on her arm, Dube lured Tina to a mine dump. By the time the other child decided to go look for Tina, she realized that they had disappeared, that they were nowhere to be seen. With a firm grip on her hand, he lured Tina up to a mine dump. He went from friendly to aggressive and then threw her on the ground, pulled down her shorts and began raping her. Thereafter, he picked up stones, which he threw on her face. He picked up 4 or 5 grips, which he threw with brute force on her face. When she tried to cover her face with her hands were also smashed. When she was finally dead, he severed her middle finger and kept it as a trophy. When Tina failed to return, a major search was launched. A homeless man by the name of Alfred Nyanga told Tina's dad that he saw Dube earlier that day walking with a little white girl. He recognized Dube from the scrapyard which they frequented in Elof Street. Tina's dad then gave Alfred 50 rand and told him to call him if he sees Dube again. The following morning, Alfred called Tina's dad and told him that he can see Dube at the scrapyard. Tina's uncle, Jacqueline, quickly hurried to the scrapyard, and then Alfred pointed Dube out. He then approached Dube and then asked him about his involvement in the disappearance of Tina. He claimed that he had no involvement in this, but they did not believe him and they bundled him into the car and then took him to Maria. Maria then confirmed that this is indeed the man who was last seen with Tina, and so he was handed over to the police. That same day, Tina's body was found on a mine dump in Jeep near the Denver off-ramp in the M2. The blooded stones that were used to attack her were still lying next to her body, next to her crumpled body. To make matters even sadder for the Bernardes family, on the day of Tina's funeral, when Tina's dad decided to stay off work in order to attend the funeral, he ended up being fired for doing so the family had to mourn while facing some serious financial distresses. Meanwhile, Dube was being detained at the Sophia Town police station. He finally had his first meeting with Piet Bielefeld. But Dube refused to speak. Nothing seemed to get him to crack. He wasn't speaking, he wasn't even making eye contact, and he was even on a hunger strike. All he did was growl and growl like an animal. During one of their meetings, when Dube refused to eat, Bielefeld lost his temper and threw his food into the dustbin. When Dube begged him to take the food out, he realized that he was starting to make a bit of a breakthrough. To further give Dube the comfort he needed to open up, Bielefeld gave him some suits, some old suits, as well as some shirts and some shoes so that he can look presentable in court. He also advised him to take a bath because the other prisoners had been complaining about his stench. It was during their third meetings that the detectives realized that Dube can be baited with cigarettes and that he also liked milk and chocolates. It was also during this meeting that Dube admitted to killing Tina Bernardes, and he was willing to point out the murder scene. He was also willing to point out a house in Queen Street in Mayfair where he had abducted the Baku cousins. On the 24th of December 2003, Bielefeld received a phone call from the police station. They informed him that he needs to hurry up and come there because his prisoner had been wreaking havoc. When he arrived, he realized that Dube had blocked the plug hole of the wash basin using his clothing. He had opened up the taps and caused a flood in his cell. He then began growling and growling at the detectives, and they had to battle with him until 4 in the morning until he could calm down. When he finally calmed down, he asked Bielefeld for a Zulu Bible. He said to the detectives, don't you know, I'm going to become a pastor one day. Later, he wanted to see his mother. He made a desperate plea to do so, and when they finally took him to her, he started cursing at her, saying all sorts of terrible words to her, claiming that it was all her fault because she had put a curse on him. On the 13th of January 2004, there was an admin error that led to the uniform branch booking Dube out of the Alexander police station and sending him to the Wynberg court. When it was realized that Dube was not on the court roll, they made a rather weird decision. They decided to just let him go free. Dressed in the suit, the shoes and the shirt that Bielefeld had given him, and a policeman holding the door open, the courtroom door open, he walked out into the streets a free man. The following morning, Bielefeld arrived at the police station wanting to book him out so that he can point out more murder scenes. When he realized what had happened, he was livid, and the police officers had to see a different side of him that day. He was extremely concerned that Dube was going to be out killing more children. 4 days after he had escaped, Dube attempted to steal a car. When the car alarm went off, the owner of the car, Bradley Adams, went out to see what was happening. He saw that 2 men were running down the street, and he was not the type of guy to leave it at that. In a hot pursuit, he chased the men down the streets, and then Dube eventually got tired and planked himself on the pavement. When Adams confronted him, he pulled out a knife and stabbed him on the leg, inflicting a flesh wound. Adams then overpowered him and took him to the Cleveland police station. Meanwhile, Dube's mother had agreed to help police find him. She had told them that he was in KZN, but she was lying, and she had actually sent them on a wild goose chase and caused them to waste a lot of resources for no good reason. 3 months later, Bielefeld got an anonymous tip that Dube had been arrested at the Cleveland police station for attempted car theft and assault. In the Cleveland police station's diary, he realized that the man arrested, named Clifford Mbata, had the exact same cell phone number for his next of kin as Mavis, Dube's mother. When he tracked Dube down at the Cleveland police station, Dube simply looked at him, grinned and said, "I'm sorry, Mr. Pete." He wanted to point out more murder scenes as he had developed a sense of trust for the detectives. And so they went, climbing mine dumps, crossing open tracts of veld, and walking along lonely footpaths. He also pointed out the scene where Thabo Dlongolo had been murdered. 2.5 years after he was reported missing, his family was finally informed that his body had been found. They had to use police photographs to identify his body, as he had been buried as a pauper. They then had to go through the lengthy and costly process of exhuming his body and sending it for forensic analysis to further confirm his identity. Only then were they able to give their son a proper burial after almost 3 years of pain and suffering. He then had to go through the lengthy and costly process of exhuming his body and sending it for forensic analysis to further confirm his identity. Only then were they able to give their son a proper burial after almost 3 years of pain and suffering. Dube also confessed to the murder of Rashunthi Singh. The trial began in January of 2006. Dube was charged with 41 crimes in total, and Dube would go on to wreak a lot of havoc in the court. When asked why he was killing children, he said, "There's a difference between children and adults. Children belong to God." On one occasion, he threw himself down the stairs. He'd often ask Bielefeld for painkillers. Sometimes he would wear a balaclava back to front, or he'd wear glasses over the back to front balaclava. On one occasion, Dube took the microphone and told the judge to step down because he believed the judge had taken Bielefeld's side. He felt that he would be better off trialed in Cape Town as the judges there would understand him better. He then threw the microphone at members of the public who had been sitting in court. When a graphic artist from the press wanted to sketch him, he started screaming, "I don't want to be sketched. What are you doing? I'll come over there and throttle you." The court officials had to use reasonable force in order to get him back in his dock. In another session, he had stuffed a newspaper under his blue tracksuit top and set fire to it with a cigarette lighter. He had set himself on fire. When an interpreter noticed that smoke was pouring from him, he yelled, "Look, he is burning." With the help of a policeman, Bielefeld tackled him and put the fire out. Luckily, only his clothes had burnt. As they were handcuffing him, he yelled, kill me, choke me like you did, choke me." When an orderly confiscated his bottle of water, at first he politely asked why, because it was just water, but then he quickly became aggressive and he started yelling, "I hope you get run over by a car and your testicles are crushed. Your muti is not going to work." From the dock, Bielefeld had to listen to threats and tirades from Dube. Dube made allegations that Bielefeld had injected him with a clear liquid which contained the HIV virus. When photographers wanted to take photos of him, he cursed at them in Zulu. He said, "Ningaze nthathe izithombe until ama-camera aphenduka afane namabhabhashi. Yingani ningashuta bomamenu?" Finally, Dube was found guilty of 7 murders, 3 rapes, 11 abductions, 6 indecent assaults, 1 with intent to do grievous bodily harm, 1 of common robbery, and 1 of theft. He was handed 10 life sentences and an additional 114 years imprisonment. Dube is currently serving his sentence at the Leeuwkop prison. Some of his fellow inmates are afraid of him. He says he does not know why. And that brings us to the end of this video. Thank you so much for sticking through till the end. This was very difficult. This was very, very difficult. Please do not forget to subscribe. Please do not forget to share this video. Please do not leave, please do leave a comment down below. I'd gladly appreciate that. And I really appreciate you guys. I really appreciate your support. And stay tuned for the next one.